Thabo, Mbeki and FW de Klerk foundations have teamed up to create the National Foundations Dialogue Initiative. They're seeking to address a number of issues, including recent developments affecting the country's political governance and the state of the economy. The foundations have arranged a series of national dialogues to give South Africans a platform to discuss critical challenges facing the country. The first is being held at Empire Office Park in Parktown. Our reporter Xoli Mngambi is there for us this morning. Xoli, a very good morning to you. And what exactly are we expecting to hear at these talks starting today?
Well, a very good morning to you too, Yuveka. And as you mentioned indeed in the intro, the Foundations Initiative aims to ignite a national conversation around recent developments that we've seen in the country, whether you talk the economy or the political landscape, Yuveka. And of course, as you mentioned, with me, I'm joined by two former presidents, that's President Thabo Mbeki and of course former President FW de Klerk. Let's talk to them now. Let me start with you, President Mbeki. Based on what we've just said with my colleague and I, Yuveka, what is your assessment of the country's political and economic landscape right now? What is the state of South Africa right now?
No, but that's what we want the country, the nation to discuss. We are 23 years into our democracy, and as foundations we thought that really this is time for our people as a whole to engage one another in a discussion exactly to answer these questions. Where do we come from? Where did we want to get to? How far are we? What's gone right? What's gone wrong? What is it that we need to correct? Because it's quite clear that there are many things that we still have to do. I mean, all of the things that everybody talks about, levels of unemployment, levels of poverty, you still have mud schools and all of sorts of social and economic challenges like this, that we thought that there needs to be a dialogue nationally about all of these things. As I say, to assess where we are, and also to look at, as a country, we set ourselves certain objectives in the Constitution. As you remember, it was a very inclusive process, the drawing up of the Constitution, and so we set ourselves objectives even to look at that, to say to what extent is the country moving in terms of addressing those objectives. So you should come to us later, after the people have engaged with this question you've been posing. Where are we? What's the state of the nation with regard to the economy, with regard to society, with regard to everything?
All right, President de Klerk, let me bring you in here. Part of what the Foundations Initiative aims to do is to inform the South African citizenry. I'm very interested in this aspect of informing the South African citizenry. What, in your view, is being pursued here by the 9 foundations? Is your mission is your understanding that South Africans are not well informed as such, or is part of your mission to ensure that the misinformation campaign that we have seen in recent times perhaps needs to be clarified?
I really think the focus in the division you draw should be on the latter part. I think the public are quite well informed, but I think we're talking from different perspectives, and what we need in South Africa, as we had it in the constitutional negotiations in the early 90s, we need to build a consensus. What do we need to do to get things right in South Africa again? We are on the wrong road, economically speaking. We are on the wrong road, constitutionally speaking. We are on the wrong road, socio-economically speaking. And I'll be dealing with that in my speech this morning. We need a dialogue. We need, across political divides, across ethnic divides, to get people to take hands and work together to get South Africa on the right road again. We need the economy to grow. We're not doing the right things to get economic growth. We need greater equality. We're not doing the right things to promote greater equality. We need adherence to the Constitution, and we finding the Constitution under threat. So it is to build, to my mind, a consensus, a growing consensus through dialogue. what to do within the framework of the Constitution to get South Africa on the right road again.
President Mbeki, I think you listening to President de Klerk, and he's made reference to the Constitution twice now, that we're on the wrong road in as far as adhering to the country's Constitution. I'm going to cut to the chase and suggest to you that a big contributor to the problems that the country faces at the moment is President Jacob Zuma. And so the question I want to ask of you is, how much responsibility does the head of state bear in as far as what the country is experiencing right now?
No, obviously, President de Klerk was quite correct to draw attention to the Constitution in the manner that you've indicated, because indeed that Constitution also spells out in some detail as to what the tasks of a head of government, the tasks of a head of state are. You will remember the judgment of the Constitutional Court last March last year, when they went into some detail in terms of describing what a constitutional democracy is, which according to the Constitution, what a constitutional democracy is, and within that context, they said that therefore these are the obligations that fall on the shoulders of a head of state, head of government. So necessarily, I think that given those constitutional responsibilities, any president of the Republic of South Africa would have a very extensive, very important responsibility with regard to some of these things that President de Klerk is raising about the state of the economy, governance, issues of governance. I mean, you see this thing that there are too many issues, it seems to me, for instance, of the function of government that end up in the courts. Even yesterday, you saw this court decision that the president needs to explain something about the last cabinet reshuffle. There are things like that, but it points to the responsibilities of the head of state to ensure good governance, to ensure that indeed these matters that again President de Klerk is raising, we make progress with regard to economic things, with social development, national cohesion, all of these challenges, as is required by the Constitution. It's not a particular person. It's a role. It's an office. There's a particular role that the office has to play, the president, as described in the Constitution.
President de Klerk, how much accountability, therefore, should accrue to the leader of government, to the leader of government?
No, I think accountability is one of the most important values encapsulated in the Constitution, and I think it is one of the aspects where we are going in the wrong way.
In your view, what should happen to President Zuma?
I don't.
What should he do?
You know, for me, this dialogue is also about post-President Zuma. This is not about getting President Zuma out of office. I'm deeply disappointed in President Zuma, so I'm not defending him in any way. But it's not about Zuma, this dialogue. This dialogue is about South Africa and all its people. It's about how do we repair damage which has been done, and how do we take the next step forward to ensure that South Africa fulfills its tremendous potential. How do we get a good future for our youth? That is what the dialogue is about. So as far as accountability is concerned, government is accountable to Parliament. Parliament is not playing its role properly in that regard, in holding government to account.
President de Klerk, you're touching on a matter that I'm going to come to next, but let's finish off on President Jacob Zuma, President Mbeki. President de Klerk is disappointed in President Zuma. Are you just as disappointed with his leadership?
No, I think we should, as President de Klerk says, I want to agree fully with him. We are not, the foundations didn't say let's have a national dialogue about President Zuma. Yeah. We said let's have a national dialogue about all of these challenges which the country faces, which includes the issue of governance. And so, I mean, let's have this dialogue. The foundations are really basically providing a platform for the people to speak. It's not as though we are coming to the people to say that as foundations we've got this view about this or the other thing. We're saying let the people speak about the country and its future, its problems, how do we solve them, and indeed develop this national consensus around these particular issues. So I think the matter about an assessment of the functioning of government, and government is not just the president, an assessment about the function of government at national, local, provincial levels needs to be part of this discussion at the national dialogue. And indeed, I'm quite sure the people will be able to make a comment about even the performance of the president.
President Mbeki, if we stay with what President de Klerk has already raised, the issue around Parliament and holding the executive to account, that's a very key institution in our democracy. They've already been found wanting in holding President Jacob Zuma, for example, to account on the Nkandla matter we spoke about. Now, there is much more that is still being asked of them, such as holding the president to account and meting out consequences in the form of passing a motion of no confidence against President Jacob Zuma. You've already made an argument around this matter, saying that the MPs, whether they be ANC MPs or sitting on opposition benches, should vote with their conscience in mind. Sum up for us what exactly your argument was around that.
No, I never raised anything about conscience. What I did was to remind people of what the Constitutional Court said. We are again back at this judgment in March last year on the Nkandla matter. As I said, it's an important judgment in my view, because the Constitutional Court took the trouble to explain in some detail what are the implications in terms of the system of government, of governance, of a constitutional democracy. And in that judgment, they said things about Parliament and its responsibilities. I mean, I would have expected that arising from that judgment, the National Assembly would have had to have a discussion about itself, because the Constitutional Court said that they acted in a manner which is contrary to what is provided for in the Constitution about Parliament. But that discussion hasn't taken place, because they really needed to have discussed to say that the court, it's not so much a constitutional court, it's a constitution, requires particular kinds of behavior on the part of Parliament. And the Constitutional Court in this specific case said that they had failed to fulfill their obligations in terms of the Constitution. I'm saying that I would have expected that the Parliament then that would be the first thing they would have to do, to say, in the light of this judgment by the Constitutional Court, what do we do about ourselves? Now, so the point I was making there about this is that, you see, again, if you look at the judgment of the Constitutional Court, it says that members of Parliament are elected to represent the people. It's specific, it's in the Constitution. And that's what the Constitutional Court said. But then you hear this argument to say, no, members of Parliament are elected to represent their parties. That's not constitutional, it's wrong. You sit in Parliament by virtue of, you are not elected by party members. When you sit in Parliament, you've been elected by the general electorate of South Africa. And hence the Constitution says that these MPs are there to represent the people. And that's what people need to understand. The parties, the political parties, obviously will have their own rules and regulations about how their members will behave. But it must not undermine this constitutional principle that when you get into Parliament, you get sworn in. There's an oath of allegiance to the Constitution and so on. And that allegiance to the Constitution means you must observe what the Constitution says. And as I'm saying, the Constitution says you are representatives of the people.
In reaction, President Mbeki, your critics will say you're asking for something that you, as a former leader of the ANC, would not have allowed against ANC members, or you'd not have allowed ANC members to do, and perhaps point you to people like Nosizo Madlala Routledge to say, would you have allowed a person like her to vote with South Africans in mind if, for example, you had had a motion of no confidence come before Parliament in as far as your views on HIV/AIDS were concerned?
No, you see, when I was in government, there are at least two occasions when the ANC decided that the members must vote to represent the people. So, for instance, when the matter about termination of pregnancies, abortion, came up, the decision was let the people just vote as they wish, because it's a matter of great public discussion and great engagement by the people on this thing. And so don't know. I mean, there are precedents in terms of the behavior of the ANC. There are precedents in terms of the parliamentarians of saying to them, you are a representative of the people, so there's no instruction from the ANC to say you must vote like this and that because you are ANC. So I mean, it's not as a principle. I would say the same thing now. I would have said the same thing 10 years ago.
President de Klerk, you're itching to come in.
Let me come in here and say, I really think we need to have a re-look at the Van Zyl-Slabbert Commission report. The problem lies in our electoral system, where you become an MP because the party appoints you as a candidate. And if you lose your membership of the party because you are not in agreement with the party about something, you lose your position as Member of Parliament. He came with a proposal which would give a more direct, establish a more direct link between a Member of Parliament and the electorate themselves. A system more or less like the German system, a system more or less like our local government system works. I think that report should be taken off the shelf where it is gathering dust at the moment, and we should have a re-look at that.
President de Klerk, let me round up our discussion and ask you this question. Some people right now in South Africa hold the view that President de Klerk cannot possibly be a voice of reason in the country, given the atrocities committed under your government in the lead up to democracy in South Africa. How would you respond to those people?
I would respond to it. There was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I supported that. There was no atrocities executed by order of me. I was never part of any decision justifying or authorizing gross violations of human rights. The Truth Commission tried its best to find something against me in that regard. They could not. I'm proud of the privilege that I've had to play a role in preventing a catastrophe in South Africa. And my record stands on its own. I say to people who say I don't have the moral high ground to do so, I disagree with you, and I'm absolutely convinced that the overwhelming majority of all South Africans disagree with that statement.
Excellencies, thank you very much indeed for this short time that you've afforded us. Yuveka, that is where we're going to leave it for the moment. Now, just a reminder to the viewers that at 9 o'clock, the official proceedings of this national dialogue will begin at 9 o'clock. So they should stay tuned to eNCA.
That Xoli Mngambi, they're speaking to former Presidents Thabo Mbeki and F.W. de Klerk, as he says they are going to be part of this dialogue and initiative, the National Foundation's dialogue, to address a number of issues and recent developments affecting the country's political governance and the state of the economy. And former President de Klerk saying South Africa needs to fulfill its great potential. They want South Africans to have a say. And Thabo Mbeki saying it's not a dialogue about President Jacob Zuma. Well, you'll hear what everyone has to say after 9 o'clock there, as you heard Xoli say.